Did you know that the belly fat you've been carrying for the last few years is not actually regular fat? It is visceral fat. And visceral fat is not just sitting there making your clothes feel tight. It is wrapped around your liver, your pancreas, and your intestines, and it is actively pumping out inflammatory signals every single hour of the day. Those signals are the ones quietly pushing up your blood sugar, stiffening your arteries, and raising your blood pressure. And the worst part is most people over 60 have been told to just eat less and move more. But here is what nobody tells you. Visceral fat does not respond the same way regular fat does. It has its own biology, and if you are not eating the right foods to address that biology directly, you could be cutting calories for months and barely touching the visceral fat at all. So today I want to give you something more specific. 8 foods that target visceral fat through the exact biological pathways that control it. And I am not talking about generic healthy eating advice. I am talking about foods with clinical research behind them, showing measurable reductions in visceral fat mass. Some of these will surprise you. One of them is something most people think they should be avoiding entirely. And if you are over 60, this list is going to matter more to you now than it ever would have at 45. So let us get into it. But before I do, a quick favor. If you are finding this helpful, take a second to hit that like button and subscribe to Senior Diet Coach. It genuinely helps me get this kind of information in front of more people in our age group who actually need it. And drop a comment below. Tell me your age and tell me which of these 8 foods you are going to add to your plate first. I read every single one of them. And what I see in the comments directly shapes what I cover next. The first food is walnuts. And I want you to think about walnuts differently than you probably have before. Most people think of them as a healthy snack and leave it at that. But walnuts are one of the most targeted foods you can eat specifically for visceral fat. And here is why. Visceral fat has 2 main things that keep it locked in place. The first is chronic low-grade inflammation, and the second is insulin resistance. And walnuts address both of them at the same time. Walnuts are exceptionally rich in polyunsaturated fatty acids and soluble fiber. There are studies showing that a high intake of polyunsaturated fats over 12 months reduced visceral fat as measured by MRI, and that reduction happened even without any emphasis on calorie restriction. What is more remarkable is that the visceral fat loss was independent of overall body weight change, meaning people were losing visceral fat even when the scale was not moving. That is the kind of result that tells you something specific is happening at the biochemical level, not just a generic calorie reduction effect. Walnuts are also rich in alpha-linolenic acid, which is a plant-based omega-3 fatty acid that directly calms the inflammatory signals that visceral fat uses to sustain itself. Visceral fat survives by staying inflamed. When you reduce that inflammation consistently, the fat becomes metabolically unstable and far easier to break down. And beyond that, walnuts increase your satiety hormones, specifically leptin and adiponectin, which means you naturally eat less without white-knuckling your way through hunger. A small handful added to a meal, tossed into a salad, or stirred into oatmeal is all it takes. The second food is one that surprises people every single time I mention it, and that is dark chocolate. Not the milk chocolate bar from a gas station. I am talking about dark chocolate at 85% cacao or higher. At that concentration, dark chocolate is a genuinely powerful metabolic tool. The reason comes down to a class of antioxidants called flavonols. Flavonols improve insulin sensitivity and reduce oxidative stress inside fat tissue, both of which are root causes of visceral fat accumulation. There was a placebo-controlled trial involving endurance athletes, where the group receiving 5 grams of cocoa daily, which translated to 425 milligrams of flavonols, for 10 weeks, significantly reduced their visceral fat and dropped their overall body fat percentage. And then there was a 6-month trial published in the British Journal of Nutrition in postmenopausal women. The women who consumed 10 grams of 99% cacao chocolate daily reduced their body fat mass by 0.6 kilograms and reduced their body fat percentage by 8%. The only intervention was adding chocolate. Nothing else changed. Now those numbers are modest, but when the only thing you did was eat a small piece of dark chocolate every day, modest is actually remarkable. The one caution here is that high cacao chocolate can contain heavy metals, so treat it as a daily addition in small amounts rather than something to eat in large quantities. 1 to 2 squares of 85% or higher per day is the target. The third food is fatty fish: salmon, sardines, mackerel, tuna. These are among the most consistent fat loss foods across the research literature, specifically for visceral fat. Fatty fish are rich in EPA and DHA, which are the long-chain omega-3 fatty acids that reduce inflammation directly inside fat tissue. They also improve insulin sensitivity and reduce fat accumulation in the liver, and that liver connection matters more than most people realize. Your liver acts as a metabolic gatekeeper for visceral fat. When the liver is accumulating fat itself, it becomes inflamed and insulin resistant, and that dysfunction feeds visceral fat storage. When you reduce liver fat, visceral fat often follows. 2 to 3 servings of fatty fish per week is enough. It does not need to be a fresh salmon fillet every time. A can of sardines works just as well. Sardines are small fish, they are low on the food chain, and they tend to be low in mercury. Just make sure the brand you choose has been independently tested. Now, before I get to the fourth food, I want to speak directly to those of you who are over 60, because what I am about to say applies to everything else on this list. As you age, visceral fat does not just get harder to lose, it gets more aggressive. 2 things drive this. First, your hormones shift. For women after menopause, and for men as testosterone gradually declines, fat that used to sit in the hips and limbs begins migrating inward, directly around the organs. Second, you start losing muscle, and muscle is the tissue that burns glucose and keeps your resting metabolism active. Less muscle and more belly fat create a feedback loop where each one makes the other worse. And that visceral fat that is building up is not passive. It wraps around your liver, your pancreas, and your intestines, and behaves like a rogue organ. It pumps out inflammatory molecules all day long. Those molecules push up your fasting blood sugar, stiffen your arterial walls, and quietly raise your blood pressure. A lot of the cardiovascular risk that climbs after 60 is not just aging. It is visceral fat doing what visceral fat does. Every food I am giving you today is working on both problems at once. It is shrinking the fat, and it is calming the inflammatory signals that accelerate how your heart and your metabolism age. Keep that in mind for everything that follows. The fourth food is broccoli sprouts. Not regular broccoli, the sprouts. The 3 to 4 day old seedlings that you can find at most grocery stores or grow on your own kitchen counter in a jar. Gram for gram, broccoli sprouts are one of the most metabolically active foods that exist. And the reason is a compound called sulforaphane. Sulforaphane does something that very few food compounds can do. It activates a protein in your cells called NRF2. Think of NRF2 as your body's internal command center for oxidative stress and inflammation. When NRF2 turns on, it switches on a whole network of protective genes that calm inflammation and protect your mitochondria from damage. And when inflammation drops inside fat tissue, visceral fat becomes metabolically unstable. It stops behaving like an active hormone factory, and it becomes far easier for your body to break it down. But sulforaphane does something else that is even more directly relevant to visceral fat. It tells your liver to slow down glucose production when your blood sugar is already elevated. That process is called gluconeogenesis. When your liver overproduces glucose, that excess fuels visceral fat storage. This is also why your fasting morning blood sugar can read high even when you have not eaten anything since the night before. Many of you over 60 have seen this on a glucose monitor and wondered why it happens. That is your liver producing glucose overnight. Sulforaphane can help dial that down. And here is the detail that most people miss. Broccoli sprouts contain between 20 and 100 times more sulforaphane precursors than mature broccoli. A small handful of sprouts delivers a dose you simply cannot get from a full plate of cooked broccoli. Half a cup of fresh raw sprouts per day is the target. Add them to a salad, pile them into a sandwich, or blend them into a smoothie. The key word is consistency. Sulforaphane has a short half-life in the body. It does not accumulate. You need daily exposure to keep sending those signals to the liver and to the fat tissue. The fifth food is blueberries. And blueberries make this list because of a specific class of polyphenols called anthocyanins, which are the compounds responsible for that deep blue and purple pigment. Visceral fat cells are metabolically very active, which actually works in your favor when you are trying to lose them, because they respond quickly to fat-burning signals. And anthocyanins send a powerful set of those signals. They suppress inflammation pathways inside fat tissue, they promote the growth of beneficial gut bacteria, and they increase the rate of fat breakdown and thermogenesis. There is a cross-sectional analysis showing that higher anthocyanin intake was associated with 9% lower visceral fat tissue. And for those of you over 60, blueberries do something beyond the waistline as well. Those same anthocyanins that calm the fat tissue also support memory, cognitive function, and blood vessel flexibility as you age. It is one of the rare foods where the mechanism helping you lose belly fat is the same mechanism that protects your brain and your circulation. A handful of fresh or frozen blueberries each day is all it takes. The sixth food is chia seeds. And chia seeds work through a completely different mechanism than the previous foods. Their power comes from soluble fiber. When you eat chia seeds, that soluble fiber feeds the beneficial bacteria living in your gut, and those bacteria produce short-chain fatty acids, particularly one called butyrate. Butyrate improves insulin sensitivity, reduces systemic inflammation, and directly influences how much fat your body stores around the organs. Visceral fat is exquisitely sensitive to gut-driven inflammation. The gut microbiome and visceral fat have a direct biological relationship. When your gut health improves, visceral fat levels follow. A recent meta-analysis of 8 randomized controlled trials found that chia seed consumption significantly reduced waist circumference by anywhere from 1.5 to 2.8 centimeters. It also reduced blood pressure as a secondary effect. Now, for those of you over 60, one practical note. Your sense of thirst naturally fades as you age, which means many of you are mildly dehydrated without ever feeling it. Chia seeds absorb a significant amount of water. If you add a large amount of dry chia to a diet that is already low on fluids, you can end up bloated or constipated. Start with a single teaspoon and build up gradually over 2 to 3 weeks. Always take it with a full glass of water. And if you are on blood pressure medication, be aware that chia has a gentle blood pressure lowering effect on its own. The two together can sometimes bring your numbers lower than expected. Let your doctor know you have added it. The seventh food is extra virgin olive oil, and I want to be specific here because not all olive oil is equal. We are talking about genuine extra virgin olive oil with a high polyphenol content, not a refined blend that has been sitting on a shelf under fluorescent lights for a year. There was a double-blind placebo-controlled trial published in the European Journal of Nutrition. It was a small study, 41 participants, but it was rigorous. The group consuming 25 milliliters of olive oil, roughly a tablespoon and a half, each morning as part of a calorie-restricted diet for 9 weeks, lost approximately 80% more fat than the group consuming soybean oil on the same diet. The same calories, very different results. The mechanism is polyphenols activating 2 important metabolic pathways. The first is AMP, which is your body's energy sensor. When AMP is activated, it signals your body to burn stored fat rather than pack more away. The second is SIRT1, also called SIRT2-in-1, which improves the efficiency of your mitochondria. This works especially powerfully in muscle tissue, where better mitochondrial function means more calories burned at rest rather than stored as fat. And after 60, that muscle efficiency point becomes critical. The more muscle mass you preserve and the more efficiently it functions, the more visceral fat your body naturally burns through, even on a normal day. 2 people eating identical calories can get entirely different fat loss results because of the type of food sending signals to their metabolism. Olive oil is one of the most powerful signaling foods you have access to. The 8th food is Greek yogurt, and Greek yogurt earns its place on this list through 3 separate mechanisms. The first is its effect on visceral fat directly. A recent meta-analysis found that higher yogurt consumption was associated with a 21% reduction in abdominal obesity. A large observational study in UK twins found that regular yogurt consumption was associated with reduced visceral fat mass. These are observational studies, so we cannot claim causation with certainty, but the association is consistent and the biological mechanisms are well understood. The second mechanism is protein. Greek yogurt is strained, which removes much of the liquid whey and concentrates the protein while reducing the sugar content. That protein load improves satiety, meaning you naturally eat less through the rest of the day without effort. And protein has the highest thermic effect of any macronutrient, meaning your body burns more calories simply digesting it compared to fat or carbohydrate. The third mechanism is the one I want every person over 60 in particular to hear: muscle loss. From your 60s onward, without active intervention, you can lose a substantial portion of your muscle mass every decade. That muscle loss is one of the most significant drivers of visceral fat accumulation in older age. Less muscle means lower resting metabolic rate, which means more of what you eat gets stored rather than burned. Greek yogurt at every meal, paired with even modest resistance exercise, directly counteracts that process. And I mean modest. Resistance bands, light dumbbells, sitting down and standing up from a chair repeatedly. That counts. It all counts. Greek yogurt is one of the simplest high-protein foods to get in, especially on the days when you do not have the energy to cook a full meal. Now I want to come back to something I said at the very beginning, because it matters for how you use this list. Visceral fat is biologically active. It does not respond to calories alone. Two people in identical calorie deficits eating different types of food will lose visceral fat at different rates, because the foods themselves are sending hormonal and biochemical signals that either accelerate or slow down visceral fat mobilization. Every food on this list is working on the same core problem from a different angle: inflammation, insulin resistance, liver glucose overproduction, gut microbiome dysfunction, mitochondrial inefficiency. These are the mechanisms that lock visceral fat in place. And these 8 foods, eaten consistently, begin dismantling those mechanisms one by one. You do not need to add all 8 tomorrow. Pick 2 or 3 that feel easiest to start. Walnuts in your morning oatmeal, blueberries as a snack, a tablespoon and a half of olive oil with breakfast, fatty fish twice this week. Small changes that stack. Consistency over weeks and months is what creates the biological shift that actually moves visceral fat. And if you have been told that the belly you are carrying is just what happens when you get older, I want you to hear this clearly. That is not the full picture. Your body at 65 and at 75 still responds to the right biochemical signals. The hormonal environment is different than it was at 40, yes. The muscle loss is real, yes. But the biological machinery that burns visceral fat is still there. It just needs the right inputs to activate it. Feed it the right ones consistently, and it will respond. I hope this gave you something concrete to work with. If you want to see the other foods that work alongside these 8, and the specific type of exercise that targets visceral fat most effectively, I have covered both of those in another video right here. Stay healthy, and I will see you in the next one.